Welcome to Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. What if you could learn from experienced real estate investors, find out what got them to where they are now, get insight into their daily habits, and take these insights to inspire your own growth? Each week, Jonathan Green shares an in-depth look at the mindful approach to real estate investing. Jonathan is a lifelong real estate investor, advisor, and coach, as well as the founder and team leader of Streamlined Properties. Whether you're looking to start from scratch, get to the next level, or just for a straightforward and honest approach to real estate investing, Jonathan seeks to provide a free mentorship program you can take with you anywhere. Now, here's Jonathan.
Thanks for showing up for another episode of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. My guest today is a repeat guest. He's returning for the second time. It's Devon Kennard, former NFL pro football player. Now he's out with a new book, Real Estate Side Hustle. It's a second Bigger Pockets book. He's going to talk about taking control of your time and money. And we're talking about exactly what the title of his book is, How to Perfect Your Real Estate Side Hustle, no matter what your profession is. Let's go. This is episode 227 of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing with my guest, Devon Kennard. You may know that name because he's actually been on the show before. He was a previous guest on episode 107 from January of 2024. And the crazy thing, we're recording on the exact same date. 1 year later, he's also a former pro athlete turned investor and a lender. He's also an author. He wrote the book, It All Adds Up. And his new book is Real Estate Side Hustle. Devon, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me back, man. I'm excited to be back. I'm sure you don't have a lot of repeat guests, so I take it as an honor.
Yeah, I think you're number 5, and I've been watching. You know, we're always in touch and texting, but I've been watching, and I've seen, like, I'm always thinking, like, hey, what is everyone doing in a year? And you've done a lot in a year because you were getting going then, and you were still going, but you've changed a lot of stuff up. And of course, you came out with the second book. So let's just start there with the side hustle, because I think it's important, of course, coming from where you did as an athlete, for people to kind of set up something for afterwards. But I think everybody now is looking for that kind of real estate side hustle. So how did you come up with the concept for the second book, and tell us a little bit what it's about and how it's applied to what you've learned?
Well, this book I'm really passionate about, and it's not that It All Adds Up and my first book wasn't, great and impactful, but this second book, Real Estate Side Hustle, it really resonates with me, my journey as an investor, because essentially I believe that all busy professionals should have some kind of side hustle as they're building life outside of their day job. And it's just magnified being a professional athlete, because I'm in a position where I can make a good amount of money, but it's for a short amount of time. So it's like, well, what about when my career ends? So it really is targeting, obviously, athletes, but really anybody who's a busy professional, and building out the systems, the team, and the processes in order to be able to build a portfolio of investments, specifically in real estate. But the principles really apply to any asset class. But, that's kind of the passion point behind the book. And it's had great reception so far, because I feel like it really connects with people who are like, I want to do that, but how do I invest passively? How do I keep the main thing, which is my career, while starting to grow a portfolio of investments? And I think Real Estate Side Hustle answers that.
Yeah, and I think it's so important for people to know, because there's so much rhetoric out there about leaving your job, whatever it is. And of course, if you're a pro athlete, you're not thinking like right away, but you could get hurt at any time in any sport, much more so in the NFL where you were just one hit and you could be out, and you need to have something ready to go. But I think even if you look at tradesmen who do really well, plumbers, electric, you could just throw out your back. It could be out 6 months, a year. I really agree with you. Doctors, if you're a surgeon and then you get in a car accident, your hand, it really can happen to anybody. So starting to figure out where you can get other avenues of passive investing is really where you went with this, right?
Yeah. And I actually feel like my view on this is against the grain now, because people have pivoted to where it's like, oh, you think real estate, the idea of passive, it's not even true. That's a lie. That's a gimmick. And I don't believe in that. And that's mostly because I didn't have a choice to invest actively. Now, one caveat with that is I will say it's not easy. I'm not saying it's like you can just roll out of bed, buy a property. It's going to give you a 15% cash on cash return and no issues ever. That narrative is a lie. But the idea that you can't figure out a way to build a passive portfolio, it's kind of a limiting belief. And active investors who do it mainstream, that's kind of what they're really pushing right now, because it's not easy to invest in real estate, but there's still ways to do it passively.
Yeah, and I think if you think of really what a side hustle is to at least someone like me and someone like you, and hopefully to the listeners, it's really something that you're passionate about that you can then turn into income. So being passionate means you're going to invest the time to do the due diligence to make sure that you're taking mitigated risk or educated risk. And that's all kind of part of what you think makes it much more available than people think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we can even dive into the specifics of what that looks like. You know what helped me build out the systems even better the last couple of years? It's Chat GPT. So I'll write out what my process is and, kind of do a brain dump. And I upload that into Chat GPT, and it's like, help me build out SOPs, step-by-step process of what needs to happen. And it's amazing what that does for you. So people who are wanting to, make real estate investing a side hustle today, leveraging Chat GPT and the things that it can do, it accelerates that and puts it on fire. And I've seen that in my lending company over this last year. So, now I'm retired from the NFL, but I still don't want my real estate investing or even my business now to take 40, 50, 60 hours a week of my time. I want to be able to take my kids to school every day, get a workout in. I want to stop early enough to hang out with my family every evening.
Yeah.
So I've put up the time up front to build out the SOPs. And I was overwhelmed at first until I started leveraging ChatGPT, feeding it information, saying, oh, I'm trying to build this out. And being able to do that in real time for an actual business has been crazy. So my recommendation in today's state is like, man, leverage that to help build out the systems and the steps you need to be able to do things repeatedly in an efficient way that doesn't take a whole lot of time.
Yeah, I think efficiency is the most important. When it kind of first started getting popularized, I feel like people were using it a little too much for more creative things like listing descriptions and things where if they didn't edit it afterwards, it was obvious that it was that. But I'm starting to react more like you. I'm starting to put more in and then get stuff out and doing things like, hey, can you just get me the standard operating procedures? And then I can play around with it. But I mean, it can save you days and weeks for just getting like, well, now I have a rough draft. And it's shocking the further that you go in anything, but especially in real estate, it's just feeding you great ideas. It doesn't mean that it's going to answer everything perfectly, but you're trying to be way more efficient. Would you like to spend 3 hours trying to research something, or would you like to type it in, get a rough draft in 10 seconds, and then go play with your kids? I mean, it's a no-brainer.
So practically something that I did is I kind of broke up my lending business into like 5 different phases of the process of like, all right, now I have to originate the loan. I have to process and underwrite the loan. I have to fund the loan. I have to service the loan. And then it's the payoff. So I broke it up into those 5 segments. And then I started to break down what I needed to do in each of those phases and feed all that to ChatGPT. And now what it's allowed me to do is to start the year, I wanted to buy back some of my time. I hired an executive assistant, and using ChatGPT and that structure, I have the full process of what it's like going through my loan cycle. I'm handing that to my executive assistant and being like, this is the baseline. It's not perfect, but it's a really good starting place. I want to kind of go through this with you following these steps and clean it up as you go. Leveraging how it actually goes. And now I'm able to have an executive assistant do parts of the business, the admin work back end, and I can rely on the fact that I have SOPs in place to where I know exactly how it's being done, and I can easily track, okay, you did it right, you didn't do it right, we need to tweak this. So I think it's a game changer in being able to have a side hustle, because now you can build the systems to make that happen, repeatedly, consistently.
Yeah. And I mean, again, everything, if you want to have a side hustle and you want to be good at it, you have to be efficient. So trying to figure out any ways that you can not hack, because I don't like hack, because that's what I feel like people are short-term solution. This isn't a hack. It's actually something that's going to make things much more efficient for you, give you information, which will leave you more time to kind of get focused and move the side hustle quicker along the way. But again, you still have to do the work. We talk about it a lot, in speaking and everything. There's a lot of investors come to the table. They want the short-term solution, so they buy a shiny object. But there's all these other things that you can do to create that side hustle in an efficient environment. It's just maybe not going to be a week.
Yeah.
Right?
No, absolutely.
I mean, that's the unrealistic part.
I think that part comes with identifying what's most important within the side hustle or investment strategy you're doing, and making sure you're making time to do that. So, for me, my big side hustle right now is my lending company, and I want to spend the time that I am putting into that on finding good borrowers, underwriting deals, and finding potential investors so I can increase the amount of money I have to lend. So I want to focus on those three things, and I never want to give that up to anybody. That's the high value ticket items, because at the end of the day, I want to be able to underwrite the deal and make sure I'm comfortable. I want to find the borrower and make sure I'm vetting them, and I want to communicate with the investors. So if I'm focused on those three things and I can systemize everything else, now that's scalable. So, I recommend anyone to identify what's the aspect of what they're trying to invest in that is really valuable. It's a high dollar thing that they need to take control of. And then how can you build out the processes and the systems on the back end to support you being able to focus on that thing?
Yeah. And over the past year, I mean, you've grown the lending business a lot, because I remember when we talked last time, you were off the ground and you were definitely working with a lot of flippers, but it wasn't as streamlined a process as you have it now. You obviously grew the company. Now you're all set up in Arizona for any types of loans, right?
Yeah.
So what's been the big difference, and what have you learned about just lending to investors? Because we talked about it some on the first show, but now you have a lot more experience of who you choose to work with, why, and what the returns look like in the lending game for you.
Yeah, so since we last talked, I've actually pivoted a good amount. And probably about a year ago, my mindset was more so like, I'll lend to just about anybody, anywhere in the country, obviously vetting them, knowing they're experienced investors. And my mindset was like, I'm connected with the Bigger Pockets community. I know a lot of really quality investors across the country. I'll work with anyone who's experienced. What I have found is it's a lot of added risk that I didn't completely factor in. I'm negating risk as much as I can because of the process I did have in place.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, we're talking about markets I'm unfamiliar with. I'm not there. Like there's just a lot of factors that could go wrong with that. So I've actually started to lend primarily in Arizona where I'm at, and for a couple of reasons. Number one, I'm actually here. I can pull up to a property at any point in time. Yeah. So there's that aspect. But also Arizona is a non-judicial foreclosure state. So essentially talking with attorneys, I can take over a property if one of my borrowers start to default in 90 days or less and spend $5,000 or less. So for the audience out there, that's a really quick amount of time and a really small amount of money to be able to take over a property and renovate it myself, sell it. Like I have the capacity to do whatever I need to do with that property once then. So I've kind of realized that I can mitigate a ton of risk, even if the borrower isn't as good. So then the debate comes, do I lend to a borrower I know from Bigger Pockets in Illinois, who I think is great, or lend to someone in Arizona who might not be as good as that guy, but it's in my local market? My mindset initially was like, I'm going to choose the great guy in Illinois 10 out of 10 times. I've actually put that on its head. And not that I would never lend to out-of-state, investors, but primarily my bread and butter is going to be in Arizona for some of those reasons. So I'll say probably that's the biggest pivot that I've made in the last year.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because the way that I would think about lending was similar to when we were talking a year ago. Like, let me just bet on the horses that I'm never going to have to foreclose, because it sounds terrible. But when you have these advantageous laws for you in Arizona, you can take an almost modified risk, because the thing with foreclosure is, and I always talk about this, if you're, someone who gives somebody seller finance, you can get the windfall. You can get all the payments up until a time that somebody defaults, and then you can just get the property.
Right.
So you're just getting two things. And if you know that the process is easy, now you're doing a less is more philosophy, which is like, I'm going to shrink my geographic area, but I'm going to be more effective inside that area with more options. That just makes sense as a business strategy. But I think it's what a lot of people, home buyers, go through that. They're like, well, I'll buy anywhere there's a good deal. And then they realize, well, I don't really have boots on the ground in Mississippi, so I'm taking too much risk. It's very similar to what you're saying. Now, if you need to, it's much easier for you to swing by or just know the area offhand. So you can kind of bet a little bit more on the properties as a whole. Like, hey, that's a great asset. I don't know this person, but I'll take that asset if they don't, right? That's a dynamic shift right there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's something to be said about that, about investing in real estate altogether. I'm overall a big component of like if you can build the right team, you can invest anywhere. And it's worked for me for a long time. So I don't want to ever preach that that's not a thing. But I will say I've entered a phase where it's like I'm starting to go deeper instead of wider. So I'm doing more in Arizona, and there might be another market or two that I'll continue to invest in because Arizona is a more expensive market. There's markets that are more, cheaper where I can get into. But instead of looking at deals in 5, 6, 7 different markets, even to buy, I'm like, all right, I have Arizona's bread and butter. What's maybe a cheaper market, maybe in the Midwest? I already own some stuff in Kansas City, for instance. Maybe that's a place I continue to invest because I can buy a standard 3-bed, 2-bath still for $150,000 out there. That's not happening in Arizona. But even with that, it's kind of less instead of more and going deeper instead of wider. And I think I would argue that in 2025, it might be a good time to start to look at investing that way.
Yeah, I love that because I think I've looked at a few people who've done either turnkey or they do syndications and they build up, do great in one market. And then when they go to another market, they do exactly as you're saying. They try to find a market that's very similar to where they are at a different price point, same rules, same laws. So you don't have to recreate a system as opposed to being in 10 different cities. So you take, Phoenix or Scottsdale, Arizona as a whole, and then you look, well, or Kansas City, is the process of how we would have to do things similar? And then if it is, you already have a competitive advantage, you have properties there. That's a much better move from one to the next because now you're like, well, these are the only 2 places, which makes you more focused as a business, right?
Absolutely. And it can get kind of hard in the real estate space today because you're seeing people invest in so many different asset classes and all over the country. So you can get
it's unending.
You can get really spread thin quickly. Like, oh, do I look at this deal in Arkansas, and then it's like Tennessee. And all right, on paper, it looks like a good opportunity. So it's been very clarifying the last couple of months of 2024, and then to start this year. Like learning and having a buy box more specifically of like, all right, there's great opportunities everywhere, but I'm going to focus on this city and this city, and not looking at deals elsewhere, at least for the time being. I think that's a good kind of perspective to have right now.
Yeah, I mean, it goes to what we were talking about. That's more efficient in and of itself because you're understanding markets at a much, like you said, you're going deep. So those markets you're an expert in, instead of trying to do that in 5 different markets at the same time. It's just smart business. I mean, it's the same for almost every part of real estate, even for just regular home buyers. When they come to me and they say, oh, I'm interested in these 10 towns. I'm like, I'm good. You're not interested in 10 towns. You just haven't done the research yet. So you need to boil that down to 3 because you can't really be interested in 10 different towns. It doesn't even make sense, especially if you have kids. You're not okay with 10 different school districts. You have to get up to par, but it is something that you had to learn. Do you think that when you were a little bit too wide, it was just too many opportunities for mistakes or things to fall through the cracks?
A lot can definitely fall through the cracks. And we could even touch on like syndication investments, which I know you have some experience or knowledge in. I've invested in a ton over my NFL career. And I've made the ones that's going full cycle already. I've made a ton of money on a lot of, it's been rocky the last couple of years, but none of mine are really failing right now. I got some that's like stalled payments but everyone's tracking. But one thing I will say is as I get a lot of that syndication money back moving forward, and I kind of staggered everything to where like every year or two, I'm supposed to be getting, repayment and all of that. But I'm kind of licking my chops to get my money back. Because one thing I've seen is it's frustrating sometimes not having any control. And, earlier in my investing career when I was super focused on just football, it was like, all right, I need it. But I'm kind of in a place, not that I'll always invest in some syndications because if you find a really good operator in a niche that you believe in, that's a great
It's just easy money.
But people don't talk about the downside of investing that way instead of buying some of your own stuff. And that's, you lose all flexibility. You're not dictating when you refinance, when you sell, 1031 exchange. Can I do a cost segregation set? Like you don't get any of those options. You're pretty much like, let's call it $100,000. I invest in this deal and they're going to tell me when I get my return type of deal.
Yeah.
So
that's important.
Yeah. So I found like people got to understand that aspect of it is where it's like, obviously choose good operators, underwrite the deal and all that. But even so, you lose all control and you're just kind of waiting and being told. And I'm kind of in a phase where I value having flexibility with my capital of like, oh, I'm underwriting this deal and now's a good time. It makes sense to refinance because I can get a higher return with my money doing this. So you can't do any of that in a syndication.
Yeah, I mean, and that's just smart diversification and knowing, again, at one time, these made sense because you thought you're probably going to play more years. The NFL, you may think you're going 10 and then you go 3, 4, 5, 6. It can change at all times. But yeah, I understand that. I'm really comfortable. I'm in 3 syndications and I don't care. I kind of consider that like I consider money that I put in index funds. I don't need it. I'm operating with other funds. So there used to be a time when I would have too much in index funds and then I would need it. And it's like, well, then it's a little bit harder to sell. And that's where I think you box yourself in.
Absolutely.
Now it's like, what you'd like to repurpose the assets, but they're still going to have a good return, most likely. But it is very important for people to understand the liquidity of syndications, and especially when that expectation is, because there's a big difference between that one that is already renting and will churn money right away, or a conversion or build, which is going to take you 2 years to even get any money. And then maybe you'll sell pretty quickly after it's all up and running, but you're not seeing any income on that at all.
Well, that you bring up something that makes me want to talk about a topic I bring up with athletes all the time today. And it's this concept of fast versus slow money and understanding, what phase you're in and what you need based on where your career is at, where your life goals are.
Yeah.
So what I mean by fast versus slow money is like a lot of the syndications, it sounds like you're in, and a lot of the ones I'm in, they might give you a dividend quarterly or something like that. But for the most part, it's a long-term play. You're tying that money up for 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe sometimes longer. And the bet is your K1s might show some depreciation. So there's some tax benefits over the long term. Maybe they're projecting on average a 15 to 20% IRR return. So it's like, okay, this is going to be a good investment overall, but you're not benefiting a ton in the short term. The average preferred return is 8%. So best case scenario on average, you're going to get 8% on your money, which is pretty good, but it's not like it's outstanding or, crazy high return. So you got to understand that. And then on the flip side, fast money is something that you're investing in that's going to give you a higher return on your money in a short time period. So I could classify cash returns as any business, investment, or career/job that's giving you a double-digit return on your time or money in a year or less. So for you, I know you're an agent. That's your fast money play right now. Like you hopefully have a pipeline of enough deal opportunities.
Well, I wish it was fast all the time.
Good point. But I would hope you're like, if you have enough deal flow, you're getting in, income annually that meets the lifestyle you want to meet. And you're getting a return on your money in a shorter time period, typically spending, especially once you get your business going. So
and you have control. Like you said before,
you can try to ramp it up. You can do other things within that. So understanding if you were in a place where you weren't looking at syndication investment as something that's down the line, and you're betting on the preferred return, you're betting on this deal going full cycle in 2 years, and it doesn't happen because interest rates went up. So they're saying we need to wait another year. Now you're put in a position where you're like, I was supposed to get paid off and I didn't. And I want to help people avoid that scenario. And that happens a lot with athletes because a lot of athletes invest in that segment I consider slow money. And that can be private equity, venture capital, a lot of real estate plays that's more long-term. And they don't have enough income coming in outside of football. So the fast money is from their career in the NFL, and that stops. And you have all your money in investments that's more slow money, long-term. And it does not feel good when you're seeing 20 grand, 10 grand, whatever that number is, leave your account every month and nothing coming in. So how do you balance your portfolio with a job or a career, business, investment, something that's bringing in income to offset the long-term investments and that slow money? So, that concept has been really important to me. And my fast money right now is my lending business. And my slow money is my real estate portfolio. I own properties as well as my syndication portfolio because I have syndication. So I think people kind of diversifying that way is the new way to think about diversification, and not just like I invest in Idaho and California, I'm diversified. Like, okay, how much fast money do you have coming in outside of your career? How much do you have long-term growth and tax strategy for the long term as well?
Yeah, I mean, again, it goes to diversification. And I get bored easily, so I kind of like to have different assets. I can always sell something. So I'm trying to figure out, yeah, what are the pieces of this puzzle that work this year? Maybe next year I decide, okay, no more syndications. It's always changing as you go. One thing I wanted to talk to you about, which I think is interesting, and you were just touching on it, it's like when you get that side hustle going and you decide fast or slow money, when you're as a professional athlete, I wanted to take a corollary to so many of my guests that I've had who were in the military, because when someone's in the military and then they get out, they don't really know what to do. But those that created a side hustle while they were there, they come in and they're like, oh, wait, I have a business that's already going. And that's really important for pro athletes, because I think people think of it, oh, they're making so much money, but then it stops on a dime. And you also that was your purpose your whole life. Like growing up, most pro athletes are like, all I'm doing is try to get to the pros. Then you get to the pros and then the pros end and you're like, well, what's now if you're not, a celebrity or something? You're not going to go, be on Monday Night Football or something. If you've set up that side hustle emotionally, I think it's going to help a lot. And I know you're involved in the pro athlete community. So tell me about that, because I think, again, just with like people in Hollywood or athletes, they think, well, it's just all money. But no, the money train stops. And then you need something to emotionally be able to do, like have value right after it's over.
I think they tie in together perfectly, because obviously you want to have some stuff going on so you're positioned well financially, whether it's fast money plays or slow money. But also, I think as human beings, we're meant to do something with our hands. And when I say with our hands, I don't necessarily mean physical work or labor, but just like to stay productive. And I think it's even more important with athletes because we end up retiring way early. But I think it applies to everybody. Somebody in the military, a doctor who's been a doctor for 20 years. Like it's the same concept. Like people society has really idolized this concept of retirement. And I personally think it's BS. Like,
me too, 100%.
Retirement is really getting to a point where you're living life on your terms.
Exactly.
Like the thought of not doing anything and you're literally golfing 6 days a week and that's awful. All your friends are working, everyone you know is doing stuff, and you're just doing nothing ever. Like, you want the flexibility to travel so you can go on vacation, but do you really want to do nothing? I don't think there's that many people who really just want to do nothing for the rest of their life. Whether you're retiring at 30, like some athletes do, or 60, doing nothing can get boring pretty quick.
Yeah, I mean, the FIRE movement is just ridiculous to me. I understand the financially independent, but like we've been saying, it's really about time freedom. I don't want to retire early. I've been on time freedom, but I'm always thinking, of course I want to do stuff. What am I going to do all day? Like I said, golf's boring to me. It takes too long. I don't have 5 hours. I'll be thinking of other stuff. I'd rather like read a book or something. But I think it's really important for people to set that expectation that you're not rushing or working through something just so you can sit around and do nothing. That's the whole point of a side hustle. So then eventually the side hustle becomes your hustle. Exactly. Or you do them both simultaneously because you use things in ways, like we were saying with ChatGPT, to make it more efficient so you can handle it both, but also still pay attention to your family, because you and I both know when you're building a new side hustle, whether it be real estate or something else, a lot of times the family's like, well, that sounds good, but now you have 2 jobs.
Right.
Like, where are we fitting into this equation? You're killing yourself to do these 2 jobs, but now we don't see you at all. That's a really important thing that people need to know too, to stay efficient on that as well.
Well, and that's that goes into working smarter, not always just harder, and putting the right team around you in place and the right processes in place. Like we're talking about SOPs. Like, I don't think the goal is to have a full-time job and then dive into a side hustle and it's taking another 20 hours a week. Like, while I was playing in the NFL, I wasn't using ChatGPT like I am today, but I was still only working 5 to 10 hours a week. During the NFL season, I committed 5 hours a week. In the off season, it was like 10 to 12. And that was my commitment. And it's like, I'm going to build the best portfolio I can with this amount of time. And I was still able to keep the main thing, which is football and all that. But I would argue that anyone has 5 hours of committed work a week that they can do outside of their day job. And, if you can make that time within your schedule, you'll be amazed at what you can accomplish in a side hustle. And I was able to steal time by accelerating what I was learning. So for me, cheat codes I had was like on my way to and from work, I always listened to a podcast or a book about what I was talking about. So I'm learning constantly. Like I'm stealing time. And that's what I talk about in my book. It's like, oh, you're like, oh, I don't have the time. Well, you're just jamming out to music on your way there. You could be learning about, syndication investments on a podcast. There's podcasts talking about any kind of investment strategy. You could be learning.
Yeah.
And now that's like, gets your brain churning, and it's allowing you to know what to do and to think about things critically that puts you in a position to be successful.
I mean, and that specifically has been in play in the NFL playoffs this year because A.J. Brown was reading a book on the sidelines, about building a life better. And everyone kind of turned it into a meme. And it's like, no, like, this is awesome. That's just, you're just figuring out what time. That's what relaxes him. He's getting motivational statements in to get back to it. And that's the same thing. Like, sure, music is good for pregame. Yeah, for really anything. When I was a trial attorney, I used to watch A Few Good Men before trial started. I was trying to get pumped up. But that's not what I need on the way to the office. I need to relax and put some in my brain. Because even if you find that I'm kind of off in thought, through osmosis, if you keep doing it, you're going to get enough extra information instead of just, like you said, listening to the radio and commercials and things like that, which are built to give us ADD.
Well, I've gotten to the point where I'm building so much momentum with that to where, I feel like it's going to be hard. I've created a strategic advantage because I listen to some type of podcast pretty much every day.
Me too.
And I'm gaining information, knowledge. It's kind of shaping, it's not always stuff I necessarily agree with. It's like, oh, I understand that perspective, but I view it this way. Yeah. It's strengthening my own opinion, whether I agree or don't agree, what have you. And people who just don't do that, I'm like, I'm putting in hours a week.
And it's free.
And it's free. That's one of the biggest cheat codes I would give to anybody out there is when you have some spare time, listen to a podcast.
Yeah.
It's a no-brainer. Even this podcast, it's going to spark an idea in somebody who ends up listening to this concept. Maybe they're like, well, what syndications are? Man, I knew it was possible to invest passively. Or it's just the thought that kind of sparks something for them.
Yeah, and that goes to, surrounding yourself with the right people and with the right information. I was never a big watcher of the news, but I used to watch it. And then 10 years ago, I just stopped watching the news. And I was like, wow, now I'm not distracted or, over sensationalized. And then I can just take that time. Like you said, I'm just going to repurpose anything into learning. When I walk twice a day. So I walk at least an hour a day. Always podcast or Audible, switching back and forth. And just like you said, I've always found that, not just, of course, this podcast, but any podcast, sometimes I'm walking and I hear something like on a Rich Roll episode, and I'm like, wow, that's insane. And then it gets me down a rabbit hole, and then I'm learning something new or finding something new for my health. That's a really important thing. And like we were just saying, it's just free information that you can do while you're just riding along in a car in any state, country, anywhere. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. And when players always ask me bro, how'd you build what you built while you were playing? Or how do you know so much about this? And it didn't happen overnight, but I will say it was a whole lot of podcasts and books.
Yeah.
I do audiobooks. I never really read, to be honest, but I've listened to a lot of books. I think I read over 30 last year in 2024. I'll probably read less books this year and just listen to more podcasts because I feel like I've read most of the books. If anything comes out that I hadn't read yet, I will. But I've been doing more podcasts this year than books most likely. But I'm I just kept learning, and now it's compounded to where, you figure out ways to apply some of the knowledge that you just slowly start to gain over and over again. And, speaking to my lending company, that's what I did with that. There's a few podcasts out there specifically for lending.
Yeah.
That has put it like a booster on my back on learning about the business of lending and how to run a private lending company and the difference between private money and hard money and how I want to structure my, I would not know. It would take me years of practicing it, the actual business of it, that I've learned this last year by listening to every single episode of a few podcasts on the subject. And I'm I would have learned it eventually, but I picked up on people who are doing what I'm doing at a higher level that's been doing it longer, and their opinions on certain stuff or how they structure certain deals or deals that aren't worth it or are too risky. And it's compounded And I did all that in a year or less, listening to a few podcasts.
Yeah, I mean, and we're talking about the same thing. That's with podcasts. That's with using ChatGPT the right way, figuring out the ways that you can just move ahead quicker and create something and just putting better information inside your head. I mean, it's just so important. And it's, of course, over the years, as you started to grow, you started to rub shoulders with more people who are higher up in the real estate investing business, which then helps you relay more information through your books, which is your information, everything you learn. And now also to other pro athletes and other people that you're talking to, coaching, helping. And I think that's where it's really like a big overall connecting. You can take these podcasts and then you can take ChatGPT. Now you're super efficient. But then when you start talking to people about it and verifying it, now you really have a solution. And your company, of course, is called 42 Solutions. But I mean, this is how you can go quicker. You need the people in there at the end to really help you to say, and you can get that partly from the podcast and then go to your next meetup and say, hey, this is right? Yeah, boom, confirmed. And you're just moving at a way different speed than everybody else.
I think you make a great point. I mean, leveraging podcast and learning and then taking that information, plugging it into ChatGPT to help you progress. And then going and networking and meeting people who are actually doing it. Like I would say, if you're trying to create a side hustle, if you're trying to invest really in general, I don't know if there's 3 better things than that.
Like, oh, yeah.
Listen to podcasts, leverage ChatGPT to learn and create documents for yourself and a process for yourself, and go network.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, like you're saying, when we were talking before about not being too separated into markets, you have to understand that there's a lot of information that you can get from books, like on general frameworks of how things work. Like if you talk about like James's new book on flipping houses, it's a great framework. It doesn't mean that in Idaho, it's going to be the framework will be the same, but the costs will be different. And the way that real estate agents work in, Biloxi, Mississippi isn't how they work, in Mendham, New Jersey. So this is where it comes. You just have to start to keep all that knowledge put in your head, but you still have to adjust over time because that's why you're trimming down the markets, because you can't take what you're doing in Arizona and just move it to New York and think it's going to work the same way.
Yeah, it becomes very specific for exactly what you're trying to accomplish. But when you're gathering all that information and then you start to formulate your own opinion and you leverage ChatGPT, you're taking that knowledge, building out and making it fit with what you want to do and what your plan is. And that's where things become special, especially as you go deeper in a strategy or a market that you want to invest in.
Hey, it's Jonathan. I hope you're enjoying this episode with my guy, DK, on his second appearance. If you want to get Devon's new book, Real Estate Side Hustle, it's pretty simple. Type it all into Google, go on Amazon, or go to BiggerPockets. This is a BiggerPockets book. Go to biggerpockets.com, go into the search bar, type up Real Estate Side Hustle, or just go to the book section. Get that book, and you'll get this and so much more from DK. Now let's get back to him. Yeah, so with 42 Solutions, who's your ideal client? I know we talked about it a year ago, but now I think that client's changed. Of course, now it's going to be generally Arizona, but are you looking to work with only flippers, or are you moving outside of that for traditional mortgages as well?
Yeah, so my primary borrower is going to be a fix and flipper. I'm not doing traditional mortgages. Yeah. I'm still only lending on investment properties. And I want to work with experienced investors because I want to work smarter, not harder. If I'm working with an experienced investor, they're probably going to be doing several deals with me, not just one. So I love that concept. I get them onboarded the first time. Every loan after that is extremely fast and efficient. Yeah. And my strategic advantage and where I found my lane is that I'm somewhere in between 100% private money, which I would consider 100% private money is like you going to your next door neighbor or your aunt,
friends and family.
Yeah. And it's like, hey, I found this property. Will you give me the money for it so I can do this deal? Yeah. And there's hardly no documentation.
Like, you give me $100,000, I'll give you 101.
and people get that. And I think that's some of the best money. If you can get access to that, that's great. The limitation with that is they usually only have so much.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So you can go to your aunt's and maybe she has $200,000 saved up and that helps you do one deal. But if you're trying to get to the point where you're doing 2 or 3 or 4, now you can't. So I think going to 100% private family friends is some of the best capital you can get because you get to pretty much dictate everything. Now, hard money when it comes to investors is going to the Kiavis of the world and these bigger hard money companies, and they do some DSCR that they're expanding everything that they do. But those type of companies, they have a very specific criteria and box they have to fit. And the reason why that is they're institutionally backed. So they have to, what that means is some bank or some bigger institution is funding their loans. Yeah. They have to have loans that fit a certain criteria. So it's like, you got to fit within their box. And if you don't, they probably can't do the deal, or they're going to change things up on you a lot. And the issue with that for some borrowers is there's opportunities that fit a little outside of that. Their circumstances are a little different. Yeah. So it's hard. The advantage to that is they're getting very cost efficient in those type of companies. Yeah. You're seeing hard money loans right now at like 10%, 9%. That used to never be the case.
I was like 16 before.
They're getting competitive to where like you can get a hard money loan pretty cheap, but the thing is their processes are much harder. They're doing it at scale. So the draw request, so if you're trying to rehab a property, it could take a long time. They could not approve it. Now you're having trouble paying your contractor, and that slows up the process for a month. So my kind of sweet spot is I'm right in between those two things. Yeah. I am truly private money, but I'm running it as a business. So it's my capital, friends and family capital that I'm raising money from, people I know, and I have 100% control of it. So I'm able to lend on the parameters that I set, but I'm not as to the extent of hard money. I'm not institutionally backed. So I don't have those same processes. It's not nearly as hard, and I can do more creative solutions. So for example, the LTV I'm willing to lend on may be a little different than a true hard money. Let's talk about, I'll do second position loans on stabilized assets. So I won't go second position behind hard money, but if you have a stabilized property that's on a 30-year mortgage and there's a ton of equity in it, that's I don't mind going on second. I'm going to charge more because it's still a second position loan. I'll go second to give you a bridge loan to fund your next project. Yeah. That's stuff that those bigger lenders are not going to do. So I found the creativity within what I can do, but having access to more capital is my little sweet spot.
Yeah, what you said about institutional hard money is so important because people used to think of hard money as kind of just the little shops who did have all those things. But the institutional hard money is a whole different story. We're seeing way more loans get towards the end and then underwriting fails. And they're like, what do you mean? I didn't think there was real underwriting. It's like, no, institutional hard money, a bank needs to sign off on it. So these people are well into transactions. That's why I tell everybody, when you're writing a contract, there's cash. Cash is cash. Hard money is not cash. Most hard money is not cash at all because the only thing that's cash is something that doesn't have to be signed off on. So that's cash and that's HELOC because you can use the HELOC how you want. Even with you're saying you're still going to take a view at it and you may say, you know what, this doesn't work for me. Or you can tell them up in advance that you've already.
But see, the difference is that's going to be up front.
Exactly.
With hard money, that usually happens later.
The more institutional, the later it gets.
Yeah, you're talking to the broker and it's like, we can do this deal. But before that money sends, there's somebody behind the scenes who has to sign off on that. And if they think that deal is a little risky, they could be changing the interest rate on you, the points that are charged,
all the time,
walking away from the deal completely. Or I know some that just make the process challenging. Like, you don't want to go with me because I charge a little more than the hard money because you could get 9.99. I saw one that was doing that right now. So under 10%.
Yeah, but
I'm charging a typical 12% in one. So you're like, I could get cheaper from this company. Yeah. So you go there, but then their draw request is much more challenging. So now you don't pay your sub. He leaves the job. He's not answering his call now. This slows your project up 3 or 4 weeks. Would you not have rather just paid me the 12% annualized instead of so that's the conversations I'm having with my potential borrowers. It's like, you got to see the big picture here. You're not going to deal with that with me. I want to make sure your subs are getting paid. Yeah. The work is getting done and you're not scamming me. It's the actual project getting renovated. Yeah. If I know it's the correct property, the work is getting done and I'm able to look at the pictures, videos, or go see it in person, and I know subs are paid, I'm releasing the draws. I'm not trying to slow up your project. I want you to get this done as fast as possible so I can go on to the next loan.
Yeah, that's a huge tip because the lower the rates come for that type of, different hard money, the delay actually helps them. So if it's harder to get a draw and then your project takes longer, then they're going to get paid more. You're trying to finish in 6 months. Well, now it's 9 months. So now you're paying 3 extra payments. And P.S., yeah, like you said, you lost your electrician. Now that's going to be a problem. Now you get to a year. Now you have an extra bubble payment. It all works into the same system, and it comes from making it look more attractive, which goes to something we were kind of touching on before. It's just about shiny objects in real estate. There's a lot of things that look good. That's how people are like, oh, Topeka, I'll just invest there. The deal looks great. Columbus looks great. All these markets look great, but you could find that all day. I mean, just go on TikTok or Instagram and someone's going to tell you this is the best market for this year. But that doesn't mean it's the best market for you. You don't know anything about it and you don't even know anyone there. So how can it be the best market for you? That's what I think is hard. And we've given a lot of great tips to try to get out of that. Don't focus on the shiny objects. Start to, make a buy box for whatever you want to do much smaller and figure out how to work, like you said before, deeper, not wider.
Yeah. And for those people who maybe, let's say you live in California and it's just way too expensive, you can't invest there. Yeah. I don't want to discourage you to think
I agree.
You need to invest in California because you need to invest where you are, go deep where you are. But choose one market, maybe two, and go deep there. And don't start investing until you build your team. So I heard it a long time ago. I think it was Brandon Turner, and I use it. I've coined it even more. But that core 4 thing of making sure you have a deal finder, contractor, property manager, and a lender. If you could build that team, you can invest in any market. Yeah. But instead of just chasing shiny objects and trying to go to several different markets, whatever's hot, Alabama was hot, or maybe still is. Yeah. And instead of jumping around, build a solid core 4 team there and go deep there. And one thing I've added to that core 4 though is I kind of worded have your starters and your bench players.
Oh yeah, totally agree.
Because I've had a great core 4 team in a market, but then property management starts slipping and I don't have a backup, and it took me too long and I lost too much money figuring that out. Yeah. So now I make sure I got my starters and bench players at all times.
I think you need, developmental league, practice squad also, because, if you're talking electricians, your starter, pulls an ACL, then they're gone. So yeah, I think I've used that as well. Of course, it suits perfectly for you who's been in the NFL. It is really important because you just never know. One day someone's going to you'll just never see them again. That's how construction works. Your plumber just disappears, maybe with some of your money, maybe not. You have to have those backups. And to your point before, what you're saying, it's you can start with 5 markets that you want to get interested in. You just don't go invest in all 5. You do all the due diligence on all 5, and then you pick one. Then you go into the one. And even if you can't find something in 6 months, you're not losing time. Then you're going to take all the knowledge that you use and just move it to your second market. But if you do the due diligence correctly and you build your core 4 plus the bench plus the G League player development, you've got all that. You really have everything that you need to succeed in any market as long as you're patient and you have people that know what they're doing. It could work in any market across the country. Even California, it's just about how much money you have. Is it a good spend for you? And do you have the people who can make it happen, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's important for everyone to know. And you've said it, we're not discouraging people from investing wide and being diversified in their investments, but be smarter with how you start. Because if you choose one area and you're doing well, why would you go 5 areas away? You're building in a funnel if you can cluster properties near each other that will help you in so many ways.
Well, and I'll give one example of something I've realized just to give some people some context. So I don't regret my real estate journey at all, but my mindset early on was I was going to invest in cheaper cash flowing markets. And my reasoning was I'm from Phoenix, Arizona. I went to school at USC in Cali, and I got drafted and played for the New York Giants. I felt when I first got into the league and started investing, all 3 of those markets were too expensive. So I'm like, where do I want to invest? I decided to invest. My first property was in Indiana. Then I went to Ohio. Then I went to Kansas City. Those were all similar markets as far as price points and what the numbers look like. You could buy a 3-bed, 2-bath for $100,000 max. A lot of my properties were even under that. And you could charge like $1,200. Yeah. So it met the 1% rule, all of those things. And I've made good money on all of those deals and all of those markets. But there's something to be said when I really look at the numbers, and I hired a bookkeeper last year, ran all the numbers, and even in those markets that are more cash flow, when I look at what I made in tax benefits as well as the appreciation over that time period, I benefited more from appreciation and tax than the cash on cash return.
Yeah,
so
great point.
That taught me something very, very important, to where it's like, if I invested that same amount of money in Arizona, California, or New York, which is much more expensive markets, I probably would have made a lot more money, because those are markets that appreciated like crazy over that time. So I'm just going to use Arizona since I'm from there. I was scared to invest there. Arizona's never been as expensive as a New York or LA, but it was still expensive in my mind at the time.
It
is. That same amount of money into Arizona in that time period, like I wouldn't have cash flowed as well as I did, but I would have made a lot more in appreciation and tax benefits.
Well,
so it puts you in perspective of like, there's nothing wrong with the cheaper markets and people who are in expensive markets and decide to go that. If you're a conservative person, I recommend it. And I am, so I don't regret what I did. But there's still something to be said about, if I was a little more willing to take some more risk, I probably would have been better off if I invested in the more expensive market.
Yeah, it's less properties, higher value. And like, so your cash flow percentage wise would be less, but your actual cash flow would be more. You just have more input to get the cash flow. So that's what's interesting. It's like, you look at, this is a 1.7% rule. Yeah, but you're still only making $320 a month. You could have a 0.6% rule and be making $1,800 in a bigger market. So that's where the dynamic is, where people have to understand it's not the amount of doors, it's the quality of the doors. And you learn that over time.
So I think what I would tell to somebody who has my mindset is like, decide, if you're very conservative and you want to start in a cheaper market, have the game plan of growing good cash flow and appreciating in that market and scaling up into the more expensive market and get faster money elsewhere. Because the cash on cash return you can make, especially today with where interest rates are, even in the cash flow markets, is not anything to what you can make in appreciation in really good locations in better markets. So, have the overall plan to guide there. That's what I would recommend somebody who kind of is in the same mindset I was in.
Yeah, and you can always take, like, if you get 4 rental properties that are, better cash flow, you can always package them in a portfolio deal, sell them to someone, and then 1031 into a better big asset when you realize. So it's not like, again, we're not saying don't invest in those 4, but yeah, like you said, have a plan. Everything is a plan. Any piece of real estate I can sell. I love holding stuff, but I still will sell stuff. If the market's hot and I can get max, I want to turn that asset into 1.5 assets or 2 assets. Right. That's how you make more money. Or like you said, hey, let me just take all this money. Now I'm up 200,000. Now I'm just going to get a better asset that produces more cash flow and more appreciation. But the thing is, you still only have 1 door. So some people are like, well, I'd rather have 2 doors. But now you have 2 doors that are kind of underperforming instead of 1 performing door. It makes no sense. That's right. the metrics of shiny objects and what people are watching. You want to get the most money and the most time freedom. And to do that, it doesn't make a difference how many doors you have. It just they have to be productive, smart, efficient doors, just like we've been saying about our processes for real estate.
Yeah, to your point, I've been really eye-opening. There's a guy that I'm good friends with here in Arizona, and he's built a portfolio. He's flipped over 2,000 properties the last 20 years and owns over 300 properties in Arizona, which is extremely impressive because Arizona is a pretty expensive market, or, it's not cheap. It's not the Midwest. And I can say with complete certainty that his 300 properties he owns, cash, and all the flips he has done and still continues plans to do, he's more wealthy than the guys on Instagram saying, I have X amount assets under management or 10,000 doors. Yeah. So it's not about the door count. Because now, okay, you run a syndication and you're the general partner. You can make great money being a GP. I'm not saying that. Yeah. But now you have legal fees. Now you have all this structure and accounting and different departments and a whole team you have to pay for. And this guy has a couple of contracting crews, a full-time executive assistant, a full-time bookkeeper, and that's how he's rolling and built what he's built. And I'm like, for me, that inspires me more than I got $20 million or $20,000 units and I own 30, all I think about when I hear that now is like, I wonder what's your net, like, exactly. What do you net? Yeah. Cause that's all that I care about.
Yeah, I mean, I think that goes to scaling. People like that, the guy you were just talking about, they never intended to scale. They scaled because they were good. They're like, well, this is producing so much, I'll just get another one, and then another one, and then another, and then it's 300. But he never set out like somebody who's 22 looking on Instagram saying like, okay, well, I want to get 10 properties next year. I have no money. Like that's not how it works. Can someone get lucky? Sure. But the people like in Millionaire Next Door, you don't know them. They're not on social media. You don't even know. They live next door in a just very regular house, drive a regular car. And there's nothing wrong with people who like nice cars. But look, half the people who drive nice cars, they're leased or they're overpaying for a lifestyle. I mean, they don't all get a big salary. But like we were saying, even with sports, the salary ends. And a lot of times the money's spent on houses for yourself. People get houses for their family and then like, wait, now that's over. There's only so much. So I think, we're providing a framework for what we're both calling retirement, which is just time freedom and doing stuff that we like that still makes money.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome.
I don't know
DK.
how we change that definition, but the whole like financial, that like you said, that's fire and like
it's
getting
crazy.
to retirement. Like I'm like,
it's flashy though. It's shiny. That's the whole point. And Millionaire Next Door is boring. It's just, but boring is what gets it done. That's what Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger always said. The most boring assets produce, they're not flashy and no one's going to know about them. No one wants to know about, those 300 properties. No one wants to go through one by one. How did you get there? They're just like want to talk that it's 300 doors. He probably doesn't have any idea how many he actually owns. It's somewhere between like, 250 and 350. I don't know, but I know how much money I'm making.
Yeah, exactly. And, for one thing I wanted to kind of like say is a lot of people are out there and for a long time, I think the narrative is finally starting to shift. I've started to see more people saying this, but that whole like buy 5 units and you're going to be good for life is like, it's a lie.
Of course
right?
it's a lie. Yeah.
It's 100% a lie because I'll give you a great example. I own some properties in Kansas City. They're doing really well. I pulled all my money out except $100,000 and I own like 10 units in Kansas City. Well, one of my properties, the trees broke into the pipes underground, underwater. I got to replace all of that and reroute it. And the whole year's cash flow from that property.
That's gone. $15K. Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I got a pretty good deal. It's going to be $10K for me.
Yeah.
But still, that wipes out the whole year of cash flow. So, and people who are out there like, oh, you're going to be able to do it like 5 to 10 properties on long term. Once those properties are paid off, rents have gone up. Could it pay for your life? Absolutely. But to think you're about to buy 5 properties in the next 3 years and then you're going to be good for life, especially with today's interest rate, that cash flows, let's say even $500 a door.
Yeah.
Like $1,500, what's 5 times, 5, that's not cutting it. $2,500.
No, not inflation. Yeah. 5 doors.
That's not cutting it. And then that's even not mentioning you have a CapEx issue, like what I'm dealing with with one of my properties. So real estate for the most part is a long-term game. And we got to make sure we're honest with that with the audience. And if you want it to be a short-term game, you have to turn it into a business.
Yeah.
Whatever you're doing. Like, so why do people fix and flip at scale? They're in real estate, converting it into a business because they're flipping enough homes to where it's a real business.
Yeah,
so what I found recently is like, if you want to replace your income and reach FIRE, you really do that through business.
Yeah, absolutely.
Business is the solution. Now, you can do business within real estate, and that's where people who are flipping, or they're GP, or they, they buy enough properties to where they are like, you buy enough properties generating $200 a month. Yeah, if you buy 100 of them, maybe you can live off of that, but they've scaled it up. So I think it's really important to acknowledge it's actually business, not real estate, that's going to solve your short-term needs.
Yeah.
And I think you're an example of that. You're an agent, you're running a business. Ideally, overall, that business overall generates enough income to sustain your lifestyle. So I think people have to pivot and stop talking about real estate that way. And it's an investment vehicle for the long term. I think it's a great one because you get tax benefits and it cash flows along the way. But you're not really going to be able to live off of that unless you convert it to a business.
That is such a great point. And that's part of what Cody Sanchez's whole mission is. And she said it before, real estate is good, steady money, but that's not startup money. startup money comes from businesses that people want to buy, for $200 million. Yeah. And like you said, you can build that business in real estate. That's how people do multifamily syndications and then sell it to a hedge fund because it's all done. But that type of money, like you said, is only from the business end. You're not buying a house for $100,000 and it's worth $100 million.
Right.
I mean, if you wait enough time, maybe it's worth $1 million, $2 million, but that's over 20, 30 years. I mean,
well, and then you got to start looking at return on capital. So like
exactly.
when you're talking about strictly real estate stuff, I was under the impression for a long time, like 8 to 10% return. That's incredible.
Yeah,
but when you start to look at profitability of a business and they're like 8 to 10% return. Like they're thinking about investing $100,000 into their business and it generating $300,000 this year.
Yeah.
Like it's an exponential return.
Exactly.
And that's where I've had the shift to where it's like, yeah, real estate is a long-term play.
Yeah.
That 8% cash on cash, not that it's not real money, but like when you start to look at business, which like we were saying, you could run a business within real estate.
Yeah.
But now you're talking about exponential return on your money or your time.
Right.
And that's where you build the real cash flow and the growth.
Yeah. I love it. Awesome, man. Well, it's been a pleasure having you on. Just for everybody who doesn't know, best places to find you. For you specifically, it's devonkennard.com. And then for your lending company, it's weare42solutions.com. And the 42 is the number 42, right?
Yep. So find me there. I'm on all social media at Devon Kennard. And yeah, reach out. I'm not hard to find.
Yeah. And the Real Estate Side Hustle is out now?
Yep. It's out now. You can find it on Amazon, or you can head to my website as well and buy it all kind of different ways. And it's also on audiobook.
Yeah. Awesome. Did you read it? That's always something I ask people.
Actually, Bigger Pockets doesn't let you.
Oh,
so
it's better. It's so annoying to do. It's like crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. My first book I actually read, and I wanted to do this one, but it wasn't even an option. I think they have like a professional that does it. So
yeah, okay. Now I got to get the audiobook. I want to see if it like has your vibe. Sure. Awesome, man. Well, it's great to have you back on the show, and of course we'll be texting. But I appreciate you swinging by. We might
have to make this an annual thing.
Yeah, right. It's January 29th day is DK Day. We're going to do it. We're either recording or an episode's coming out on those days every year.
Yeah, man. Marketing your calendar. Make sure next December you hit me up so we can get it scheduled.
I'm going to put it on right after we get off. Awesome, man. Well, I hope I see you soon, but great having you back on the show.
Awesome, man. Thanks for having me.
That was Devon Kennard. We told you where to find him. I'm Jonathan Green. See you next episode. Thanks for sticking around to the end so you could get a preview of who's coming up on episode 228 of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. And it's Mark Lumpkin from STR Cribs. I know you know what STR is by now. That's short-term rental, but Cribs is a kickback to the MTV Cribs days. STR Cribs is the #1 leader in done-for-you STR renovation and design. So we're going all in on just that: short-term rental, construction, renovation, design, amenities, and scale. We'll see you next episode.